All right, let's begin like this, folks. The end is near. Oh my gosh, we're at the last standard. Can you believe it? All right, before we get into the end of the last standard here, let's do a quick little preview of what you're about to see here. We'll be looking at the abortion case, Roe versus Wade. Looking at another case that's going to start affirmative action. We're looking at Richard Nixon's The Good and the Bad. All right. We'll be looking at Gerald Ford, the good and the bad. Jimmy Carter, the good and the bad. Who else we got here? We're looking at the Iranian hostage crisis. Ronald Reagan, the good and the bad. Reaganomics and a few other things with him. The collapse of the Soviet Union. Bill Clinton, the good and the bad. Let's see what else we got here. The Electoral College. George Bush, the good and the bad. And that'll bring us to an end. That's right. All right, guys, let's have some fun in U.S. Standard, US25. All right, guys, it's been a long year. You beat me up. You beat me up bad. But here we go. Let's get into this and finish it up strong because the end is near. So US25, what? Changes. That's right, changes in national politics took place since 1968. All right, so 68 and beyond is what we're looking at. From presidential scandals to Supreme Court decisions, and from international peace efforts to the outset of the war against terrorism, national politics have changed since 1968. In ways undreamt of in the early 60s. This standard will measure your knowledge of the events in the most recent period in U.S. history. And it starts like this. We're going to the Supreme Court. Some other crazy decisions. The Supreme Court ruled on many cases that would change the perception of civil liberties and civil rights in America. Two controversial cases, which still are a big deal today, with the greatest impact were Roe versus Wade and the Regents of the University of California versus Bake. And we will just call it the Bake case or the Bake decision. All right, here comes your first one. Roe versus Wade. That's right, Roe versus Wade. Happens in 1973. It addressed the right of women to choose whether or not to have an abortion. It's the abortion case. That's what it's all about. By expanding the constitutional, all right, in the Constitution it protects our constitutional right of, and what it's really all about, it's not abortion, it's a right of privacy. To include what it's all about. What do we say Roe versus Wade all about? To include abortion. That's right. The court extended civil liberties protection. So women, you do have the right to choose whether to have an abortion or not under the Roe versus Wade case. All right, now that takes us to our second one, which is Regents of the what should be the University of California. All right. Oh, I think I spelled that foreign. California. There we go. Dang, I can't spell today. California versus, we called it Bake. Bake. All right, and this will take place in 1978. It ruled that race, skin color can be used when considering applicants to college. All right. But racial quotas cannot be used. The court barred the use of quota systems in college admissions, but expanded civil liberties rights by giving constitutional protection to, you need to know what this is. The easy way to remember it is A for African American. They're called affirmative action programs that give equal access to minorities. So basically, affirmative action programs make it to where you have to have a certain amount of minorities in your college or your business. That's right, affirmative action, the Obey case, and Roe versus Wade abortion. All right, now let's get into two presidents. First one is President Richard Nixon and President Gerald Ford. That's right, Gerald Ford. He's got a good name. So let's start with Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon's presidency was one of great successes. There's some good things that happened under Richard Nixon, and he's overwhelmed with criminal scandal. All right, so the bad always outweighs the good, it seems like. Nixon's, all right, check out, this is the good thing, visit to China, all right, in 1971. He went with Forrest Gump. That's right, they went together. It's in the movie. He went and played ping pong there. So Richard's visit to China in 1971 was one of the, I said it earlier, successes. He visited to seek scientific, cultural, and trade agreements to take advantage of a 10-year standoff between China and the Soviet Union. Nixon hoped to win the Chinese to his side in case he had future negotiations with the Soviets. All right, so he basically brought China into a very good relationship with the United States of America. Later, Nixon was part of the, y'all know the name of it, the Watergate scandal, which centered on his administration's attempt to cover up a burglary. That's right, a burglary of the offices of the Democratic Party in the White House apartment, in the Watergate apartment of office complex of Washington, D.C. The crime was committed by Richard Nixon's re-election campaign team who sought political information. Nixon won re-election in 1972, but his efforts to cover up the crime soon unraveled, and facing impeachment, he did not get impeached because he resigned. That's right, in 1974. All right, the scandal left Americans dismayed by Nixon's actions and cynical about politics in general. It also led to changes in campaign financing into laws requiring high-level government officials to disclose their finances. Because Nixon and many of the people involved in Watergate were lawyers, the reputation of the legal profession suffered too. So we just saw some of Nixon's good and bad. The bad was Watergate. The good was visit to China. Now let's look at his successor. Nixon was succeeded by his vice president, Gerald Ford. All right, check this out, he was only president for 2 years. That's it, 2 years. All right, his presidency was basically just damaged because he's connected to Nixon. He was his vice president. It was damaged again, check this out, when he pardoned Nixon. He gave Nixon, if he was wrong in Watergate, it wouldn't matter because he got a presidential pardon for any crimes that he may have committed. All right, here's the good for Gerald. One bright spot is that it's that war we've been talking about for so long. The Vietnam War will come to an end. It ended during the Ford administrations by following a path established by Nixon. But Ford's domestic policies, that means at home, Ford's domestic policies, that's right, they failed to stop the growing inflation. All right, and unemployment. So two things people always worry about. Prices going up and having a job. So they failed to stop the growing inflation and employment, and America experienced its worst economic recession since the Great Depression. Y'all have heard that before. In the Obama administration. There you go. So Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford, the Vietnam War came to an end. That was a good thing. But after he got out, there's going to be a recession. That's right. And who is going to be the president during this recession? That will be Jimmy Carter. All right, let's look at Jimmy Carter. All right, Jimmy Carter, I call him the Peach President. You should know why. Do you know why? Because he was the governor of the Peach State. What's the Peach State? It's where you're from. He was the governor of Georgia. So Jimmy Carter's administration. So Jimmy Carter's presidency was strongly influenced by, this is who he cares about the most, international issues. He tried to bring peace. All right, to that place that we've been struggling with for a long time. He tried to bring peace to the Middle East. All right, and in this is what he's going to be known for as good. The Camp David Accords. He negotiated a peace agreement between two hostile nations. First, we have the Egyptian. That's Egypt, the Egyptian president, and the Egyptians are Muslim, and the Israeli prime minister, that's your Jews, so you have your Muslims versus your Jews, the Israeli prime minister at Camp David. That's one of the president's houses. All right, in what year was this? 1978. This was the first time there had been a signed peace agreement between Middle Eastern nations. Although the agreement left many differences unresolved, it did solve urgent problems facing the two nations. And in 1978, again 1978, we'll have the Iranian Revolution, which replaced a Shah, which is a king or a leader of Iran, friendly to America, with a Muslim religious leader unfriendly to America. And then when Carter let the Shah enter the United States for medical treatment, angry Iranian revolutionaries invaded the U.S. Embassy. That's like where the United States people that are Americans in Iran, where they stay. And they invaded the U.S. Embassy in Iran and took 52 American hostages. Oh my gosh. Jimmy Carter, what do? We call this the Iranian hostage crisis. Lasted, there's your 444 days until the captives were released after the election of that great president, Ronald Reagan. Jimmy Carter didn't do a darn thing about it. And it nurtured, all right, and nurtured, there I am, it nurtured anti-Americanism among, who are we talking about? Among what group of people? The Muslims around the world. All right, there's Jimmy Carter. That's right. And Jimmy Carter with the good and the bad. He gets a peace agreement signed between some unfriendly folks in the Middle East, the Egyptians and the Israelis. But the Iranian Revolution, 52 Americans hostage. Ronald Reagan had to come and save the day. Jimmy Carter better be thanking him. All right, guys, let's end right there. That will be part 1. Remember, the end is near.